You're listening to Rise Above, a Rogers Behavioral Health podcast, where we sit down with Rogers experts who are changing the way the world views mental health and addiction. Hi, listener. Thank you again for joining me for another episode of Rise Above, a podcast from Rogers Behavioral Health. Today, I wanted to talk about tough emotions and kids. Tough emotions are those feelings that can be overwhelming and difficult to manage. Sadness, anger, fear, frustration, anxiety. Emotions that can arise from a lot of different situations, especially for kids. Conflicts with friends, changes at home, challenges at school. Now, these feelings are a natural part of life, but for kids who are still learning how to navigate their emotional world, they can be pretty intense. So in this episode, like many episodes, I have an expert with me to discuss strategies to help children understand and cope with these tough emotions. And with me today is Dr. Amanda Heins, supervising psychologist in the OCD and Anxiety Center at Rogers Behavioral Health. Dr. Heins, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Happy to join.
So first up, what are difficult emotions when it comes to children, and why is it important for children to learn how to manage them?
Sure. When I think of what difficult emotions are, immediate ones that come to mind are, in general, things that feel more uncomfortable. And so things could be literally discomfort, like that could be something a younger child may say, I just feel uncomfortable. But more like anxiousness, stress, distress. If I feel sad, sometimes can be uncomfortable. If I'm feeling angry or irritable, those emotions can also be more uncomfortable, because many times these types of emotions are we're more likely to feel very vulnerable as well in these moments. And from a society standpoint, those emotions traditionally, especially depending on how they're expressed and the severity of which I'm expressing, let's say anger. If I'm expressing anger in a more of a composed state, usually we can be more effective, right? But if I'm not in control of my emotions and my anger looks like someone yelling at a sports like game, that's really getting mad at the refs. That was an awful call, and all sorts of other language afterwards. Those types of behaviors we've seen over time, are not acceptable. Like, people in society do not look at those in high regard. And so I think it is tricky for kids when they're feeling uncomfortable, because many times parents are like, oh, no, calm down. Like, don't feel that feel right now. And so, and not saying that's bad, but it's okay to recognize we have a range of emotions, I guess, is the bottom line. And sometimes that may include frustration, anxiousness, stress, anger, all in moderation. As long as we are learning how to control the feels, that's the biggest lesson that all of us of all ages need to learn, that we know how to manage. Because if we don't practice how to manage it, it will come back as we get older. And it's important to learn while the learning moments are smaller stumbles.
Sure.
Versus when we get older, they can be usually much bigger.
And then, I guess, as a parent, what role do we play in helping our kids cope with discomfort?
A big one. I think on a couple different levels. I think as a parent, we are providing psychoeducation or teaching, right? Like through, here's literally what that looks like. Here's literally how what that means and what could help. Let's talk about different ways to manage, or let's talk through moments that maybe they tried and they swung and missed a little bit, because maximizing those learning moments is just as important as reinforcing when things go well. But viewing moments of that they tried to manage it, but it was a little bit not great. Those are really important too, as long as we're approaching that from a very supportive, validating, learning mindset mentality, is really helpful. And then another aspect as a parent is we're also teaching them through modeling. kids and people in general are very much observational learners, but that especially is true for kids and adolescents. And so they are watching throughout their upbringing. How do my parents, how do my loved ones around me, and that includes grandparents, other loved ones, right? Not just parents. How do people that I love and hold in high regard, how do they cope? How do they manage? And so what we do matters from that regard as well too.
So we've really got to pay attention to how we deal with tough emotions to set an example.
Absolutely.
So another thing as a parent that weighs heavily on my mind and a lot of people's minds is like technology and screen time. Does that play a part in this?
It can, absolutely. It depends on in what context. If we're looking at if screen time is being used, I guess the rule of thumb usually is most things in moderation, right? And I feel like that could be true still for screen time, as long as that's also assuming that the screen time platform that I'm using is appropriate for my age, and is a safe place for me to be using the technology. So assuming those things are true, most things in moderation are okay. But if we're using technology as a form of avoidance, perhaps, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, that's where things can get a little bit sticky and problematic, is because when we're jumping into video games, it's kind of like we're jumping into an altered world, sometimes literally if you're doing VR, right? And so that's fun, and it can be a great break, if you will. But when you turn the device off, those stressors are still there and we haven't made any momentum on them, right? We have not learned any new skills to manage. And so we feel no more equipped to lean into them than we did beforehand. And so I think it's important that while taking a break, if I'm feeling really overwhelmed, or if I've been studying for a quiz for a little bit, yeah, absolutely, play a round of Mario Kart or something. Fine, great, right? Because you're going to jump back in later, or you're going to go to your baseball practice or your dance class or something. Those are great things. But if we're using it in the sense of, I feel overwhelmed, I'm just going to tune everything out and jump into technology, that's where things can get problematic.
Gotcha. And we will be right back. Everyone deserves a chance for recovery. That's what drives Rogers Behavioral Health Foundation. They're helping people get the mental health care they need, from covering treatment costs for those in need, to building clinics where care is hard to find, to funding cutting-edge research. They're making real change happen. And guess what? You can help. Head to rogersbhfoundation.org and be part of creating a future where mental health and wellness thrive. And now back to the interview. Are there warning signs that parents should look out for, like that maybe a child isn't coping well?
Sure. I think of things that I would be looking for, well, it's just each, parents know their children, right? You have an idea since the moment they were first in your arms what their temperament is, right? And so as obviously we get older, of course we grow in personalities and things like that, but you have a general sense of what your child's baseline is and what their range of managing looks like. And so if you are seeing significant changes that are looking more ineffective, like they're a little bit more quick to be more irritable, or something that's just not as characteristic of them, that's also not very effective. So irritability, quick to be yelling, or maybe even like shoving, more physical signs of frustration. Those would be things that I would be definitely wanting to have a conversation about with them. Certainly want to talk about not only the behavior, but this is different. Like this is, more of like, let's talk about these observations and better understand what's going on. Certainly want to set some limits with behaviors, of course, as well. But if we only did that and didn't go the next step farther, is by approaching from a curiosity standpoint of like, hey, buddy, I've noticed these things. Let's talk. I wonder if you're noticing it too. I want to understand kind of what's going on. That's one of the most important steps, because then we can better understand what they're trying to navigate. And so, I guess definitely being aware of what if it's out of character for your child, that would be something to keep an eye on. If you're also noticing isolating behaviors, so maybe they used to be more chatty with friends or going places, and now they're saying, yeah, I don't want to go to practice tonight. I don't want to go hang out with so and so. Those would be kind of things I would be wondering more about if it would turn into a pattern. So those would be some initial ideas, I guess.
Sure. And you say it like going to practice and interacting with friends. What is the importance of getting out of the house and, socializing? Where does that come into
Yeah,
play?
it's a huge, if there's nothing else, then we encourage our kids, that is to become involved in some things that they enjoy. It doesn't have to be every single thing they enjoy, because that we also have to find a manageable balancing act. And if you have children already that are in any type of, whether it's sports or theater or create any other creative arts, like many of those entities now, the involvement in even one particular thing can be a pretty time consuming aspect. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, but I guess the point I bring to that is being mindful of not doing too much, because there is that is a thing that can happen. But it is important to get involved in something outside of school. There's so much that we learn through these types of experiences from a pro-social standpoint. Not only just connection, how do I connect with people, but how do I establish new relationships? And it's a great place to meet people, because it's also, in theory, people that enjoy something that you are passionate about too. So it's a natural thing that you automatically have in common with that person. So the likelihood of making a connection definitely increases just by nature of that. But then also, you're going to have moments that not everybody's on the same page. And what wonderful learning skills, right? Like
Sure.
life skills.
Yeah.
There's so much life skill learning in those types of activities that will also better prepare kids for how to cope with a range of emotions, problem solving, stress management. So there's a lot of different positive implications to being involved in things outside of school.
Any advice for parents of kids who maybe they have trouble socializing, or maybe they're just shy, or maybe you consider them shy, but maybe it's something else? Are there
Yeah.
things parents can do to help in that case?
Absolutely. I think all of this advice applies. What I would say, though, is I would first sit down with their child together and talk about what they're noticing from a curiosity standpoint, and see what their child's perspective is, because what we see and what they feel may not always be the same thing. And so making sure that we're on the same page, that would be an important first step. But then also creating a plan. I think the earlier you start, the younger that you start with your child, in emphasizing in a supportive way, but emphasizing the importance of connection and getting involved in different things, trying different activities, right? You don't have to, if you sign up for baseball once and we'll commit to this season, because that's important to show commitment.
Sure.
But once the season's finished, if you really aren't feeling it, okay, but now we've tried it. Now you can say you've tried it, and we'll find something else. But we'll keep looking is the moral of that story. But coming up with a plan together of what's the bigger picture goal. And by and large, most people, all people truly do want connection at the end of the day. Even if they say they don't, deep down, 99% of us truly do want connection. It's just learning how to practice. And like many things, and social anxiety is included in this, the more we practice those skills, the more confident we're going to feel, and anxiety goes down. And so these types of activities are very, very like they're natural exposures, essentially. So if we were thinking from a treatment work standpoint, those are the same kinds of things that we would be doing in a treatment setting, is practicing how to socialize with people your age, initiating conversations. So, but it first starts off really with understanding from their child's lens, like where do they feel confident socializing? Where do they feel it gets a little tricky? and then coming up with a plan together of how we can build or increase skills, right? So we wouldn't want to just necessarily throw them in and say, oh, good luck. Sometimes, maybe, depending on what it is. But if there's a way that we can practice, maybe we can do some role playing of like, well, how do you carry on a conversation, for example? When you're face to face versus just texting all the time, so those would be some things that come to mind.
And you mentioned, maybe you're trying out for baseball just this season. We'll get through the season. I think that's an important point to make, that like it's okay to show the kid that just try things. If you don't like them, it's not that there's no going back. You have to do this.
Correct. Right. Yeah.
But it's giving them an out later, but to just try things and see how it goes.
Right. Right. I mean, I think it's important for them to understand, like when we sign up for something, unless there's something really egregious, right? That none of us were predicting, of course, that's a different scenario, but we also want to model commitment, right? So like being transparent about, we are going to see this through, because that's a good learning skill too. And perhaps over time, their interest could change. It also goes into, do I, and does my child have realistic expectations of themselves? If they think if they're starting basketball and they think they're to be honest the moment they step on the court, I love that enthusiasm, and that's not super realistic, right? If they've never touched a basketball, and so making sure that we're setting ourselves up for success, and that's why we keep coming back to practice, kind of thing. So, yeah.
And we will be right back. Real quick, I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about WISE, the Initiative for Stigma Elimination. It unites people across the nation to support those touched by mental illness and addiction. The compassionate approach champions personal stories and powerful connections, fostering healing by reducing stigma through evidence-based practices. Rogers Behavioral Health supports the work of WISE through their Community Learning and Engagement Department. WISE collaborates with a diverse network of organizations and individuals united in the fight against stigma. You can learn more about WISE, explore their 4 key programs, and connect with them by visiting the website www.eliminatestigma.org. And now back to the interview.
Now, we've talked about noticing when things might be a little off emotionally with your kids. Is there an extreme version of that? Like, is there a time when maybe we definitely need to look to get professional help?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, so the warning signs I was highlighting initially, so any major shift in your child's behavior, if they were more social but now you're seeing them more isolative or avoidant, not attending, not wanting to come out of their bedroom as maybe at all, or seldomly. Maybe you're noticing they're not taking as good of care of themselves in terms of showering. Now, caveat of what's outside of the norm for them, of course, right? We know that that's a work in progress for some as they're learning how to manage their own hygiene needs as they're getting older. But just anything that's really not characteristic of them would be warning signs I would want to keep an eye on. But then if those continue to worsen, like we're refusing to go to school for now, like let's say we're refusing to leave the home, we're having a lot more arguments at home, or actually, maybe we're making verbal or physical threats, or we are now getting more verbally aggressive or physically aggressive at home or elsewhere. Those would be significant warning signs of like we need more support. And obviously too, if there's safety related concerns that they're bringing up, of like if they're saying that they are hurting themselves, or they want to hurt themselves, or they have a plan to end their life, obviously those are very significant warning signs that we want to take seriously. And so those would be definitely signs that I would be encouraging families to reach out. The bottom line, I would say really though, is if parents are unsure, call. When in doubt, call. You're never committed to, especially through Rogers, you're never committed to any services by simply just picking up the phone. You're, simply just here's what's going on. Do you think we need some more support? Do you think, or could we, is outpatient? Does that make sense? That's what we're here for. And so when in doubt, I would always encourage parents to call, because that gives you a peace of mind of like when could it make sense to do something more. And it's better to be proactive when we can be than reactive, because usually when it's reactive, it's like things are pretty far down the path at this point.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, it's not, as a parent, it's not your job to diagnose, but maybe it's your job to get your child in front of someone who can.
Correct. Right. And I think that's another element that parents also, it's a tricky, because you love your kids unconditionally, and it can feel, parents can feel like they have their own things that they're working through. When there's signs that my child may need more support, it's almost as though I've heard many parents say, like, I feel like I'm failing. Why can't I help them? Why can't I figure this out with them? That I have to go outside of me to help them, and so that's, I think, another big component, that parents feel guilty at times, that I'm not able to help my child right now. And that's the conversation we have quite often of, like, by actually seeking support, you're modeling that it's okay to ask for help. Like, and thinking about it in another context of, if you have a sore throat and your ears hurt, can you treat an ear infection or strep throat, like, without going to the physician? Do you have an antibiotic at home to treat that? No, right? So there are moments where we do need other support, and mental health is no different. It just feels, quote unquote, different in those moments.
This is all good advice. Dr. Heins, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to the next time.
Absolutely. Same. Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it. We covered some essential strategies for helping kids deal with their tough emotions, like sadness, anger, fear, frustration, anxiety, and hopefully you walked away with some valuable tools to help support your children in your life. It's important to remember that tough emotions are a natural part of growing up, and with the right guidance, kids can learn to navigate those feelings in healthy ways. Building emotional resilience is a journey, and every step you take to understand and support your child's emotional well-being makes a difference. So thank you again for listening to Rise Above, a podcast from Rogers Behavioral Health. Be sure to like and subscribe to be notified of new episodes. As always, if you know someone who you think might benefit from listening to this episode, please share it with them. And if someone you care about is struggling with a mental health or substance use disorder, visit rogersbh.org for a free mental health screening. Thanks again.